Let's start with a map of the United States. To illustrate how the Part D prescription drug plan works, we are going to take a trip across Social Security country. We will start here in Tampa, Florida, and travel to the middle of the country. At this point, we have traveled 2,250 miles, but instead of miles, our trip will be measured in dollars. So once we have reached a point slightly short of the center of the country, we have incurred prescription drug costs of $2,250, which, except for copays, have been paid for by the government. At this point, we have reached what is known as the gap, the point at which Uncle Sam stops traveling with us and leaves all the costs up to us. In this area, I like to refer to it as the donut, because the donut is shaped like a zero, and that is how much the government will pay for your prescription drugs during this period. You will continue to make all prescription drug payments with no government assistance until you have spent $3,600 it takes to get across the gap. Remember, this is an annual calendar year program. When the new year starts, you begin from ground zero and share the first $2,250. Once you have reached the other side of the gap, you have paid the $3,600 out of your pocket. Uncle Sam boards again and joins you in your RX prescription drug travel plans once more. This time, the government pays 95% of all of your prescription drug costs, and you pay the remaining 5%. Remember, however, this is a government program, and nothing the government does is likely to be as simple as I just laid out. The government has something called a look-back provision, and this look-back provision works in your favor in varying degrees. It seeks to determine how did you arrive at the gap, or simply how much money did you spend in accumulated copays before you reached the gap. To repeat, copays are the small portions of the drug costs that you are responsible for from day one. The important thing to understand here is that the formula the government uses when applying the look-back provision. Here's how it works. The accumulated copays are deducted from the $3,600 gap figure to determine a net gap amount. We illustrate this in the following three examples. In the first example, meet Joe Medicare eligible. He spends a total of $200 per month in drugs, out of which he makes co-payments of $50. Medicare pays for the balance of $150 under Part D. So in a 12-month period, Joe has spent a total of $2,400. 12 months times $200 per month. And therefore, he exceeds the initial benefit of $2,250 by $150. Since he has made co-payments of $50 per month for 11 months in 1 week, his total co-payments comes to $562.50. By deducting these co-payments from the gap figure of $3,600, the result is $3,037.50. Joe's gap obligation is only $150 for the final 3 weeks of the year, well short of the $3,037.57 gap obligation. Therefore, look-back provisions do not apply in this case. But in reality, because Joe is a low user of prescription drugs, most of his overall costs for the year are covered. In the next example, we encounter Beth, senior citizen, who is taking $500 per month in drugs. The picture for Beth looks like this. Beth initially shares costs for the first 4.5 months of the year. Her drug copays total $150, and the balance of $350 is paid for under Part D. As Beth enters her 5th month, she finds herself in the gap, that dreaded place where the government stops participating with you in your prescription drug cost. As a result, Beth must pay the next $3,600 herself. However, the government's look-back provision enables her to deduct all copays she's made before reaching the gap, which occurs after she has a total drug cost of $2,250. The total copays she's made during this period can then be deducted from the fixed gap amount of $3,600. As previously mentioned, when a participant is in the gap, all drug costs are paid by the recipient. The total of copays for Beth before reaching the gap is $675. The government permits Beth to deduct the $675 from the gap figure of $3,600, reducing her gap obligation to $2,925. This figure is what Beth must pay completely on her own before the government comes back in. As you can see, Beth has paid 100% of her drugs during the second half of month 5 and for months 6 through 10. She finally reaches the other side of the gap 11 days into the 11th month. At this point, she has reached the gap figure of $2,925. Once Beth reaches the other side of the gap, the government pays 95% and Beth 5% of her total drug cost. In the third example, Charlie Part D is paying $1,000 per month in RX drugs. The breakdown looks like this. As you can see, in this scenario, Charlie reaches the gap in only 2.25 months. The look-back provision allows Charlie to deduct the amount of his copays to that point of $675, giving him a net gap figure of $2,925, $3,600 less $675. At this point, Charlie is on his own for the last 3 weeks of the month 3, for all months 4 and 5, and a little more than his first 5 days of month 6. Now Charlie is on the other side of the gap. To Charlie's great relief, from roughly the second week in month 6 until the end of the year, the government pays 95% of his prescription drug costs. This process starts over again January 1st of the new year. What is important to remember is that Medicare Part D plans have the following features. A, sharing of costs for the first $2,250 of prescription drug cost. B, a gap of $3,600 minus your accumulated copays. The beneficiary has 100% of prescription drug cost obligation during the gap period. And C, 95% government, 5% participant prescription drug cost sharing once the other side of the gap has been reached. A special note for limited income patients. If you qualify for a low income subsidy or have Medicaid, then your drug copay is $1 for generic drugs and $3 for name brand, or $2 for generic drugs and $5 for name brand with no gap. Your drug RX benefits in both scenarios are available to you at no plan premium, or ZIP, zero, naught, nada. It's free, folks.